if you have yet to see Andor, you can still watch this video, because something interesting happened in the show, and like I said, this is not a spoiler for the show at all, but for the first time ever in Star Wars, the year has been addressed. So in the beginning of the show, and like I said, this is no spoiler, it actually makes it more understandable, is that Andor, at the beginning of the series, it says the year 5 BBY. Now, if you're someone that is not into the online Star Wars community, you're more of a casual fan, you may question, what does BBY mean? And my brother and my dad also didn't know, and I had to explain it to them, which led to more confusion. But I'm here to explain what BBY means, and I'm actually going to go out of my way to actually kind of explain how everything in Star Wars kind of fits in the timeline with the whole BBY thing. So, to start things off, BBY is the measurement in time. It's like a year. You know, in our world, we have BC and AD. BC means before Christ, AD means after death. You know, we're in 2022 AD. We're 2022 years after Jesus Christ was born. Yes, religious, and that's where our calendars lie in the real world. Now in Star Wars, the point where, like in Star Wars, the equivalent of Jesus Christ being born is actually the Death Star blowing up. And that's 0 BBY. It turns into ABY. Now what does BBY and ABY mean? BBY means before the Battle of Yavin, and ABY means after the Battle of Yavin. Now what does Yavin mean? Well, that's the planet Yavin 4. You know, Yavin, the planet from A New Hope. You know, that jungle, the one with a temple in it. That planet. And that's where at the end of A New Hope, that's where the Death Star blew up. That is essentially what the timeline is. And you may say, why is that the center point? Well, it's the fans created this timeline to honor A New Hope, because without A New Hope, without the original Star Wars film, then nothing would have existed in the Star Wars mythos. So if it wasn't for that film, then nothing would exist. So it's a great way to honor that film. And even Disney tried to overwrite that by creating their own unit of time called BSI and AS. It's such a confusing thing. So it's BSI or ASI, before Star Killer Incident and after Star Killer Incident. The problem is that most of the timeline is before that, so it's not really a good measurement, and it's just Disney trying to push their new stuff in our faces. But the BBY and ABY is here to stay. Now that's it's an official Star Wars show. It's now here to stay. And now that you know the basics of BBY and ABY, I'm going to go and explain where everything from the Star Wars films and shows lie in this unit of measurement in the timeline. Now, I'm only doing the shows and the movies, whether it's live action, animated, no video games. That's no video games. Because just to make it more easy to understand. So the first thing that's on the timeline is Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. Yes, this is the first film. Like I said, only doing films and shows, because I know there's comics about the High Republic that's set 200 years before The Phantom Menace, I believe. So, but the first film or show that the public can watch right now is Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, which is set 32 BBY, or 32 years before the Battle of Yavin. And also for this video, I'm going to be saying BBY and ABY, because it's a pain in the butt to constantly say the long form thing of that. Enough rambling. Up next is Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, 22 BBY. Everything's simple. But then you have the Clone Wars animated show, not the Clone Wars micro-series. The micro-series is not canon, but the Clone Wars 2008 movie and the show takes place 22 BBY to 19 BBY, covering the entire 3 years of the Clone Wars. Next up, as you would expect, you have Revenge of the Sith, Episode 3, that takes place 19 BBY. Now, right after Revenge of the Sith, you have The Bad Batch, which takes place right after Revenge of the Sith in 19 BBY. But since there's a new season coming out, that could change the dates. They need to say how many years afterwards. But the Bad Batch takes place in the span of the couple months after Revenge of the Sith. So it will still be in 19 BBY, or it could be 18 BBY. It depends when their new year starts, because there's no way to tell when the new year starts. So it's either 19 BBY or 18 BBY, but it's right after Revenge of the Sith. So Solo is up next, and this is interesting because there is a prologue, before the main film. And that prologue is 13 BBY, while the rest of the film is 10 BBY. A year later, we have Kenobi in 9 BBY. And after that, the newest Star Wars show, yes, I'm dating myself here, is Andor, which is 5 BBY. Now, Andor, the timeline for Andor has already been covered, or by, the writer, Lucasfilm themselves have said, this is what the timeline of Andor is going to be, which is 5 BBY. That's what Season 1 is going to take place in, but Season 2 is much different. Season 2, every 3 episodes, is going to take place in a span of a year. So the first 3 episodes of Season 2 of Andor will take place 4 BBY, so the next 3 will be 3, then 2, and the last 3 will be 0 BBY, because it will take place right before Rogue One. Now, Andor Season 1 coincides with Rebels, which is an animated show, a sequel to the Clone Wars, which also takes place in 5 BBY. And that show does have a similar time span as Andor, which it takes place from 5 BBY all the way to 0 BBY. So, could Andor and Rebels, the cast of Star Wars Rebels, meet up? That'd be cool. I don't know if that'll work. But that's where Rebels lies. And now we are going to Rogue One, which takes place 0 BBY. And also with Rogue One, you have A New Hope, or the original Star Wars, which is 0 BBY. Or you could say 0 ABY, because that's where the Death Star blows up, changing it to ABY. So everything afterwards is now ABY after the Battle of Yavin. And things start off pretty simple. You got The Empire Strikes Back, which is 3 ABY. Then, a year later, is Return of the Jedi, which is 4 ABY. Now, I always thought that it took place 3 years after The Empire Strikes Back, but no, it's actually 1 year, which does make sense. So, 4 ABY is Return of the Jedi. Now, up next is The Mandalorian, which takes place 9 ABY. And The Mandalorian, also the Book of Boba Fett, and basically everything that Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau are making, like the Ahsoka series, Rangers of the New Republic, if that's ever going to come out. Also, I believe the Skeleton Crew, which I think is a new live-action show coming out in the next couple of years, that's also going to be in 9 ABY. So a lot of stuff is happening in 9 ABY. That's where what fans call the Mandoverse is taking place in. But moving away from the Mandoverse, or 9 ABY, we're jumping way ahead into 33 ABY, which apparently that's where Star Wars Resistance. So I always thought that it was 34 ABY. If you haven't watched Resistance, that show connects to The Force Awakens, where Poe from The Force Awakens is in Resistance, and he actually says to the main character of that show that he's going to a mission on Jakku. So it implies that Resistance is the same year as The Force Awakens, but in the thing I'm reading here, it's 33 ABY, which could make sense. Now, Resistance is an animated show which isn't liked by many fans, but in the timeline, it goes from 33 ABY to 35 ABY. Now, as mentioned before, The Force Awakens is 34 ABY, but also The Last Jedi is as well, since both take place right after the other, similar to Rogue One and A New Hope. But this is actually different because this is a sequel rather than a prequel, so both films take place in 34 ABY. And finally, last, but certainly not least, is The Rise of Skywalker, which takes place 35 ABY. That is a complete timeline right now. And like I said, there's going to be more stuff coming out. Literally, I am dating myself by saying that Andor is the newest series, because a month from now, Tales of the Jedi will be coming out, and that'll have its own weird timeline, because it's about Jedi from different time periods, so that's going to be crazy to keep track of in the timeline. But there you have it, everything currently in Star Wars, whether it's film or show is here in the timeline. I didn't do video games, like I said, or comic books, because there's so many comic books. There's a couple of video games I didn't want to cover them because to not muddy the water, because not everyone has played video games or read a comic book. So, but everyone most likely have seen the movies and shows. That's why I covered that. So if you guys enjoyed, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, because I'm going to go now. So, goodbye, everyone.